Okay, let's unpack this. You've brought us a source today that dives deep into a really memorable story from Buddhist tradition, the Assaka Jataka.
That's right. And this narrative, well, the source material you shared, it's really designed to make you think deeply about some pretty fundamental human experiences. Grief, attachment,
Yeah.
and the sometimes, frankly, startling implications of change and rebirth across lifetimes.
And our mission here in this deep dive, basically to peel back the layers of this ancient tale and really pull out the core insights it offers about, that struggle to let go of the past.
And understanding the nature of reality itself.
Exactly. And it's not just some dusty old text. The source highlights details that are surprisingly vivid and, well, kind of shocking in places.
They really make the lesson stick with you.
Definitely.
It gets right to the heart of what, according to this tradition, is a primary cause of suffering.
So let's start where the source begins, with the immediate problem. We're introduced to this monk who is just completely crippled by grief. His former wife has passed away, and he's just unable to function. The source says he's stopped eating, stopped his duties.
Totally consumed by the loss.
Yeah.
Yes, his fellow monks, they get so concerned they actually have to bring him before the Buddha.
Right.
And he tells the Buddha, the root of his distress is simply that he cannot stop dwelling on his late wife. It's just eating him up.
And this is where the Buddha offers that perspective shift, right? He tells the monk basically, look, this isn't a new problem for you.
This isn't the first time you've been caught like this.
Caught in this kind of desire, this attachment for this particular woman.
Exactly. He says, even in past lives, you've behaved like this, and it's always led to great misery.
Wow. So it introduces this idea that these emotional patterns, these ways we cling.
These tendencies, yeah, they can actually repeat and follow us unless they're truly understood and, released.
So to illustrate this really powerful point, the Buddha then tells a story from way back.
Many, many lines ago. Yeah.
A past life story. This is where we meet King Assaka. He's a ruler in a city called Portali.
Right.
And the source tells us he had this deeply beloved queen, his chief consort, named Opadi.
She's described as charming, beautiful, graceful. They were apparently inseparable, utterly devoted.
Like a picture of perfect mutual affection.
Absolutely. But then, life happens. Change happens. Queen Opadi dies.
And the source describes the king just plunging into this overwhelming grief.
Overwhelming almost doesn't capture it, does it? The source says he becomes utterly sad and miserable.
He has her body placed in a coffin.
And keeps it right beside his bed.
For 7 whole days, he lies on top of the coffin, just lost and reminiscing about her.
Completely neglects himself, his duties. His advisors are, understandably freaking out a bit.
About the kingdom, about him. It's a really stark depiction of how intense grief and attachment can just make your whole world collapse.
Totally. Now, during this same past life, the Bodhisattva, that's the being who is destined to become the Buddha, he's been reborn as an ascetic living up in the Himalayan mountains, and he has these supernatural powers.
And with these powers, he sees the king suffering, sees the pattern repeating.
Exactly. And he resolves to intervene to try to help break this cycle.
So how does he do that?
Well, using his abilities, the ascetic appears in the king's park and just takes a seat on this auspicious-looking stone.
And someone notices him.
Yeah, a young Brahmin, one of the king's attendants. They start talking. The ascetic asks, is the king a just ruler? The Brahmin says, yes, he's righteous, but
he's got this crippling grief.
Right. He explains the whole situation lying on the coffin for 7 days, just consumed by sorrow.
And the Brahmin, he senses something special about the ascetic.
Yeah, he senses this extraordinary presence, this power, and asks if maybe he could help the king.
And the ascetic makes this, incredible claim.
Absolutely incredible. He says, look, I don't know your king personally, but if you bring him to me, I can tell him exactly where his queen has been reborn.
Okay, that's big. But there's more.
Why? And what's more, he says, I can make her speak to him.
Make her speak. Wow. I mean, that one sentence must have just planted this huge seed of hope.
Instantly, the Brahmin rushes back, tells the king.
And the king rushes out to the park.
Right. He asks the ascetic, Sir, is it true? Are you the one? Do you know where my queen is?
The ascetic confirms it, but then comes the twist.
The revelation that must have just stopped the king cold. You can say that again.
What does he say?
The ascetic explains that when Opadi was alive, she was apparently so caught up in her own beauty.
Intoxicated by her looks.
Kind of, yeah. So much so that she neglected to focus on cultivating fair and virtuous actions.
Okay.
So, because of that, she has been reborn as a dungworm.
A dumb worm.
A dunworm, living right there in the very same park.
Whoa. Okay, the king's reaction.
Immediate, absolute disbelief. The source says he cries out, "I don't believe this. I will not believe this."
And honestly, I can imagine you hearing this, feeling the same way. How can the beautiful, beloved queen possibly be a worm?
It's a shocker. But the ascetic, he's ready. He says, "I can show you, and I will make her speak."
Okay, so the proof. How does he do it?
He tells 2 park workers to roll a lump of cow dung closer to them.
Oh boy.
Then he points to the dung and specifically to a worm emerging from it and says, there is your queen Opati.
Just like that.
She's just come out of this lump following her husband, who's also a dung worm, he adds. Look closely.
The king must still be reeling.
Totally. He repeats his disbelief. What? My queen Opati? A dung worm? I still don't believe it.
This is the moment, isn't it? The pivotal moment.
It is. The ascetic uses his supernatural powers. He gives the dung worm the ability to speak.
And he addresses the worm directly.
Right through the king's denial. Speak, he commands, and tell us your former name and position.
And does it.
The worm, acknowledging the ascetic's holiness, responds. Clear as day. My name was Opati, sir. I was the chief consort of King Assaka.
Oh man, that simple confirmation, just verifying the unbelievable, that must have hit hard.
Devastatingly powerful. But the ascetic isn't done yet. He needs to demonstrate the full, sometimes brutal truth about rebirth and change.
So he asks another question.
The crucial one, directly to the worm. Tell me, Ohadi, who do you love more now?
No.
King Assaka or this dung worm who is your husband?
And the worm's answer, I'm guessing this is the core of it.
It's absolutely shattering for the king. And really, for anyone clinging to a past reality. She says, Holy Sir, King Assaka was indeed my love in a former life.
So she acknowledges it, the past, the bond.
She does. He was dear and beloved to me then. But then she delivers the profound message about impermanence.
What did she say?
She continues, however, since that life, rebirths have occurred. Those past memories and feelings, they're now clouded and confused.
Clouded and confused.
He's like a distant dream to me.
A distant dream, wow. The person he's mourning, the love he's clinging to, is literally perceived as a dream by the being she's become now.
But now, she states very clearly, in this new life, new joys and new sorrows fill my memories and feelings.
This life is what's real now.
My current life is what is real for me. I cannot live dwelling in the shadow of a distant memory. My worm husband.
Yeah.
He is all there is for me now.
My worm husband is all there is for me now. That declaration just completely dismantles the king's whole reality. His suffering, which was built on his memory of Opati.
It does. But then, it gets even more startling, if you can believe it.
How so?
To really drive home the point of just how complete this transformation is, this shift in attachment. She adds, if my husband, this dung worm, wished it.
Wished what?
I would kill King Assaka and use his blood to clean my worm husband's feet.
Okay, wow, that's intense. That is where the rubber meets the road for the king, right?
Absolutely. This final statement, coming from what was his beloved queen, it has this profound transformative impact.
It shatters the illusion completely.
Yes. The source says that upon hearing these words, the king finally got it. He grasped the fundamental truths he'd been ignoring.
He realized he was clinging, desperately clinging, to a memory, a feeling.
Projecting his own stuff onto someone who had fundamentally changed, moved on in the cycle of rebirths.
He understood that as real and deep as their love had been, it just didn't exist in that form anymore.
The human Queen Opati was gone. She simply didn't exist.
And he was forced to confront some really painful questions then.
Like, if he truly loved her, the being, would he still love her if she didn't love him back?
Or if he truly loved her, would he still love her if she was a worm?
Exactly. This realization just cuts right to the core of what he thought love was.
He saw his love, at least how he was experiencing it in his grief, was actually deeply selfish.
Conditional, tied only to a temporary form and circumstance.
And most importantly, he saw that all the immense suffering he was going through
wasn't caused by her death itself.
Right. But by his own refusal to accept the reality of change, his refusal to let go of his attachment to a past that just wasn't real anymore.
That's the key insight.
So what does the king do after this huge, painful realization?
He finally lets go. Back at the palace, he washes himself thoroughly.
Gets rid of the old grieving clothes.
Puts on new, clean robes. He orders the queen's body to be removed from his chamber.
Cleans the room.
Thoroughly. removes all physical traces of Opadi. These actions are really symbolic, aren't they?
Yeah, of his internal decision to finally move on.
It's a powerful image, releasing the past, embracing the present.
And the story wraps up how?
It says the king was deeply grateful to the ascetic for showing him this truth. He paid his respects, went back to the city,
And got on with life?
eventually married another queen, ruled his kingdom righteously, no longer paralyzed by that grief.
And then the source connects it all back to the monk at the beginning.
Right, brings it full circle, explains the rebirth that linked all the characters.
So the grief-stricken king Assaka
Was eventually reborn as the lamenting monk we started with,
and Queen Opadi
reborn as the monk's deceased wife.
and the ascetic
The wise ascetic was reborn as the Buddha himself.
and the Brahmin who first spoke to the ascetic.
He was eventually reborn as Venerable Sariputta, one of the Buddha's chief disciples.
Wow. So the same beings, caught in the same pattern, intense attachment, the suffering it causes.
Repeating across lifetimes until this intervention, this moment of insight.
It really underscores how these deep-seated emotional habits can just follow us, causing the same kind of pain again and again.
Until we gain this level of understanding and actually break the cycle of clinging.
So that's the journey, the king, the queen, the talking dung worm. Quite a story.
It really is.
Now, let's pull back a bit. What are the fundamental lessons this startling narrative offers us? What can we, sitting here now, take away?
Well, I think this story is just a stunningly vivid illustration of key Buddhist concepts. First, you've got anicca, impermanence.
Everything changes.
Constantly. Not just physical forms, but identity, feelings, relationships. The queen turning into a worm is maybe the most dramatic picture of that you could possibly paint.
And then dukkha, the suffering. The story clearly links the king's massive suffering directly to his clinging.
His inability to accept that change happened, that the object of his attachment was gone, not just physically dead, but existentially transformed.
Yeah, precisely. His suffering wasn't really caused by the death itself, was it?
No, it was his refusal to let go of his fixed idea of who Abhati was, what their relationship was. He was essentially in love with a memory.
A fantasy, almost, rather than the reality of what had actually happened.
And the worm's declaration, "My worm husband is all there is for me now." That's not just shocking, it's a brutal lesson in non-attachment, seen through the lens of rebirth.
It forces the king, and us really, to confront how fluid identity and relationships can be across time.
And it raises an important question about our own attachments, even just within this one lifetime, right? Things change, people change, relationships evolve. If we hold on to some rigid idea of how things were, who someone is supposed to be,
We're basically setting ourselves up for suffering when reality inevitably shifts.
yeah. The king's journey from that utter despair to finally releasing his grief shows that freedom comes not from avoiding loss,
But from accepting impermanence.
accepting it and letting go of our resistance to change. It's a powerful, maybe confronting reminder that holding on to the past, even a cherished one, causes suffering when that past just doesn't exist anymore in the present reality.
So we've journeyed through the Assaka Jataka, from the grieving monk to the ancient king, and that unforgettable image of the talking dung worm.
Unforgettable is right.
We've seen how clinging to the past, even something like deep love, can be the source of profound suffering when it crashes against the reality of impermanence and change.
It really forces you to reconsider what you believe is truly permanent or essential about yourself and about your connections to others.
Definitely. So here's something to maybe mull over as you go about your day, drawing directly from the source material we've been discussing.
Okay.
If a deep, devoted love between two people can transform so completely across lifetimes, so completely that one being can become indifferent or even, willing to harm the former beloved for the sake of a new attachment, like the worm's chilling words suggested.
Yeah, that's the really stark part.
What does that suggest about the ultimate nature of our attachments right here in this life? What is the true essence of love itself if it seems so, dependent on the form and the circumstance of our current existence?